Hello all, this is a video from Argera and today I'm going to show you how to handle slowly changing dimensions in Power BI. This is a very interesting topic, especially for those who want to tackle more advanced topics in data warehouse and analytics. So, before jumping into details, we will first see what is the business need that slowly changing dimensions are trying to solve. Once we understand this, we're going to examine what exactly is slowly changing dimension into more detail and how we can implement this in Power BI. Lastly, we're going to show how to apply slowly changing dimension in a business case through a live demo in Power BI. So, let's begin. Let's assume that we're working for an airline company and we want to present to the commercial director how many confirmed and reserved tickets we had for the Q1 of 2020 at the end of January. As you can see on the table, by the end of January, we had 105,000 confirmed tickets, and this means that 105,000 customers have actually used their tickets to fly. For February, we have 123,000, and for March, we have approximately 126,000 reserved tickets. Remember, these tickets in February and March are reserved but not confirmed yet because we're still at the end of January. Now, let's assume that we got massive tickets cancellation once COVID hit on February and March, and eventually only 45,000 tickets for February and only 32,000 tickets for March have been confirmed, as all others have been cancelled, as you can see here. So, if we look at the same data at the end of March, instead of 355,000 confirmed tickets, we have only 183,000 tickets, as all the rest have been cancelled. So this difference means that all these tickets have been cancelled. Now, 1 year passes by and we are on January 2021, when commercial director makes the same question again. How many confirmed and reserved tickets we had for the Q1 of 2021 versus the Q1 of 2020? Without slowly changing dimension, the year-on-year difference is inaccurate, since the 183,000 we see here is after cancellations. But in 2021, cancellations had not materialized yet. So this means that the difference of 99.5% is not accurate. But now if we had slowly changing dimensions functionality, we could go back in time, meaning January 2020, as we can see here, and show tickets as they were actually on January last year, making the difference of 2.8% 100% accurate. Why? Because now that we're at the end of January 2021, we have 365,000 tickets. And if we go back in time, what was the status at the end of January 2020, we could see that the ticket was 355,000 before the cancellations on February and March. Now, what is slowly changing dimension? Essentially, slowly changing dimension are data stored in a way that help us go back in time. In order to give you a practical example, let's look on this slide where we have the full history of the status of an airline ticket. So let's assume that on the first day of January, a traveler got a reward as a voucher valued at 158 euros, which he later used to make a ticket reservation on the 8th of January. Then, on the 16th of January, the traveler decided to upgrade the ticket, which now is priced at 165 euros. Finally, the ticket status changed one last time to flown, and the revenue for the company materialized to 165 euros. For all those intermediate dates, the ticket maintained the same status, which only changed on those 4 distinct dates. So, in the first case, the ticket had status voucher from the 1st of January up to the 7th of January. and then the status reserved from the 8th of January all the way up to the 15th of January, etc., for all the other statuses. As you can see, by using slowly changing dimensions, we can go back in time at any date and see the status of the ticket on that day. Remember that besides the status, we can also track the revenue and any other characteristics that we want to know the history of. So now let's jump into a real case study. First, we will see what data would be available through a typical data warehouse implementation. As data warehouse stores the latest data, the only information that we would have available for that ticket would be that on the 18th of January, someone flew with that ticket and paid 165 euros. This means that we have lost all the historical information, which would help us to do a more detailed and advanced analysis. This is why we need slowly changing dimensions. Indeed, when we do have slowly changing dimension, as is the case here, in our data warehouse we have the full history and we can go back at any time and see the specific status and revenue that the ticket had on that day. Now, before jumping into Power BI, I want to show you the two tables that we're going to use today. Two very simplified tables, but will help us to get the essence of slowly changing dimension. In the one table, we have all the current ticket data, and this is what a typical data warehouse contains. What is the current picture of the business in terms of status and revenue. What we need to do is create another table called historical status that will track the full history of the ticket along with the date and the status it had on each date. Now, let's switch to Power BI to see how to actually use slowly changing dimension on the provided example. So, here we have an imaginary airline company called Oceanic Airlines, some of you may have heard it, and in order to showcase how slowly changing dimension works, I will use as example a single ticket. On the left-hand side, you can see a table containing the full status history of this specific ticket. Throughout the whole demonstration, this table will not change. I did it on purpose in order for you to have it as a reference and understand how slowly changing dimension works in practice. So, let's say that the customer won a ticket voucher on the 1st of January as a raffle prize. The customer kept the voucher for 7 days and then it used it to make an actual reservation on the 8th of January. So that was the date the ticket status changed from voucher to reserved. As you can guess, the flight date was on the 18th of January. How do we know that? You can see that the status of the ticket remained reserved from 8th all the way up to 17th, whereas on the 18th, the status changed permanently to flown, which will remain until the 31st of December 2019. Now let's quickly recap what happened before I actually show you the report. The ticket was a voucher from the 1st of January all the way up to the 7th. It then became a reservation from the 8th all the way up to the 17th of January. And then from the 18th onwards, the status changed to flown. On the right-hand side, we have the current status of the ticket, which changes depending on the reference date that I'm going to pick. What this means is that the reference date allows us to go back in time and show us the ticket status on the date that we pick. Why is this useful? Because if we go back in time, we can see exactly how our business was performing on that date, how many tickets we had in voucher status, how much revenue was under reserve status. We can even make actual year-on-year comparisons in terms of booking pace, etc. So I have actually implemented slowly changing dimension in this report, and before showing you the exact formula, let's see what's happening when I change the date. If we decide to see what was the status of the ticket on the 3rd of January, we get that the status is voucher. Is this correct? Yes, it is, because from the 1st up to 7th, we can see in its history that ticket was under voucher status. Now, if I change the reference date to 6, we see that the status still remains as voucher. Now, what will happen if I change the reference date to the 9th? Based on the history table, I can see that the status should change to reserved. Yeah? Which is actually the case here. This means two things. First of all, the status of the ticket is reserved. So if I count all the reserved tickets, this will be included. But also, its revenue will sit under reserved as well. So if a commercial manager asks how much revenue did we have in reserved tickets on the 9th of January, we can easily answer that question using the slowly changing dimension report. The same happens if I go to the 10th, 11th, etc., etc. All the way up to the 17th. Yep. So the 17th is the last date that should show this ticket as reserved. Indeed, if I change the date to 18th, now the status and its revenue goes under flown status. The question now is how we can achieve this functionality. For this purpose, I have created a new measure called revenue SCD, which basically says to Power BI to return only the status and the revenue that is active on the selected reference date. Now, if we jump into the formula, we assign in the variable reference date, well, the reference date, no imagination here. The reference date can be picked up as we have shown in the filter we showed earlier. So if I select the reference date here, then the formula picks this date up and is assigned to the reference date variable. Then we create another variable that's called ticket revenue, which basically calculates and retrieves only the revenue and status which is active on the filter reference date. Now, I'm not going to show you how calculate and filter works, as there are thousands of tutorials, videos, and guides readily available on the internet, but I'm going to give you the essence of the formula. So what I'm saying here is basically calculate the ticket revenue, but filter and show me only the ticket status that has an active from date less than or equal to the reference date and active to date greater than or equal to reference date. So let's pick an example and assume that we pick a reference date of the 15th of January. Then if we go back to historical status table, we will see that the only status that satisfies both conditions is the status reserved. You can of course double check it at your own pace, but I promise it works. All in all, this is how formula works essentially. You filter out all the revenue and status that are not active on the picked reference date. So in here you will see that this formula essentially filters out the status as flown and status as voucher. And along with that, the ticket revenue is filtered out as well. So only the correct status and ticket revenue is shown here. Now, let's generalize this idea by jumping into the performance report. Here, for your convenience, I have put on the lower part of the report details about the specific tickets we have examined so far, so you have a reference. On the upper part, we have ticket revenue per month for all the tickets for the airline industry. Now, what is interesting here is that by using slowly changing dimension, we can calculate the ticket revenue for all the flown or reserved or cancelled flight based on specific reference dates throughout the whole year. So let's say that we want to examine the value of the flown tickets. On the 3rd of January, we have only a ticket revenue of around 3,000. And in this revenue, our example ticket is not included. Why? Because on the 3rd of January, the status of the ticket was still voucher, so its revenue is not counted under flown status. If we go on the 10th of January, then the ticket becomes 15,000, and now, because more and more tickets went into flown status, but the revenue of our example ticket is still not included. Why? Because on the 10th, again, its status is reserved, so this revenue is not included in the flow. Now, if we go on the 31st of January, then the ticket revenue becomes 51,000, and now this ticket revenue includes our example ticket. Why? Because now our ticket on the 31st of January, our ticket is under flown status, so all these 110 euros are counted toward here. Another thing that you may have noticed is that because essentially we went back in time and we're still in January, basically we only see January month here. Yeah, we cannot have tickets as flown in February if the reference date is in January. Think about it. If though I pick the 28th of January, then both months will appear here. Then this is happening because I can also see data from January and from February flown status. This is overall a guide showing you how you can implement slowly changing dimension in Power BI. Remember, if you can implement slowly changing dimension functionality, you can go back in time not only in terms of a single dimension or a single metric, but you can go back in time in terms of profits, discounts, sale, customer status, sales territory, etc., etc. It is a very important functionality, especially in businesses where changes happen rapidly. Thank you very much. I hope it helped you understand what slowly changing dimension is and how you can implement it in Power BI. Bye.